Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hello and welcome to episode 81 of the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. I'm Tim Robertson, the host of the Observer's Notebook and also the coordinator of the training program within the ALPO. Thanks for downloading and listening. The ALPO collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and associated phenomenon, and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, also known as the Strolling Astronomer. This podcast depends upon donations from you, our listeners, to keep it alive. If you enjoy what you hear on the podcast, you can help us out by donating via Patreon. You can give as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5, you receive early access to the podcast before it goes public. For a monthly donation of $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you receive producer credits on the podcast and 1 year's membership to the ALPO. You can help us out by going to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/Observer's Notebook. If you're interested in joining the ALPO, you can for as little as $18 a year. You can find out more at alpo-astronomy.org. And yes, we're also on the Facebook. Just search for ALPO Astronomy. And this podcast also has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. And if you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, please subscribe. That way you'll never miss another episode of the Observer's Notebook. And now on to episode 81. Hope you enjoy. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back to the Observer's Notebook podcast. Today we have on the podcast from the Jupiter section of the ALPO, Craig MacDougal. Welcome to the podcast, Craig.
Oh, happy to be here.
Yeah, now why don't you just give everybody a little bit of background about yourself, age, location, occupation, things like that.
Okay, let's see. I turned 62 this year. My training is as a musician and music educator. And so that's what I do most of the time these days. But in the around 2000 or somewhere around there, in the 90s. In the 90s, I managed to be the lead presenter at the local planetarium here in Tampa, Florida. And did that for 12 years, which was lots of fun.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, but so that's pretty much. I'm married to a musician, and I'm making my living teaching music and playing.
And you're a saxophone player, I understand.
I'm a saxophone player.
Yeah, and how long have you been playing sax?
Yeah. Oh, well, no. Okay, hang on. If you count when I started in junior high school, that's
wow,
about 50 years.
It's pretty good. So, what kind of sax do you have? Alto sax or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't have a soprano sax.
Okay.
In the 80s, I made my living, most of my living as just a gigging musician.
Really?
Yeah.
In the Tampa area?
In the Tampa area. Well, all up and down the coast, all the way down to past Sarasota, almost did some in Marco Island, and then up the west coast, up north, up into, Lecanto, Crystal River. No, I don't think I ever got to Crystal River. Playing mostly 40s style big band.
Ah.
So Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, all that kind of stuff.
Now, are you in a band now?
No, I play on a volunteer basis at my church. In fact, we're playing for this Sunday services, and there's been a few stints where I was in charge of that orchestra, but the current music director there is comfortable directing an orchestra, and I'm happy to be just part of the section.
Now, you said your wife's a musician as well?
Yeah, she's a pianist.
Oh.
And also a piano teacher. For my saxophone, I didn't get to that part. I have an alto, a tenor, and a low A baritone saxophone.
Oh, my goodness.
because it was like, when somebody calls you up, you play sax, yeah, okay, and what do you need?
Right.
Yeah, I've got it.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I've dabbled in music my entire life, and I love the sound of a saxophone. I think it's just incredible.
Yeah, it's very flexible. I spend a lot of my time. I mean, I can play the really edgy jazz and all that kind of stuff if that's what's needed, but I also can get a sound that I can play in a traditional service in the Methodist church and nobody runs and hides.
Great. Now, how did you get interested in astronomy?
Astronomy actually came before my interest in music. That goes back to when I was 8 or 9 or something like that. I grew up south of downtown Jacksonville, Florida, at the time when I was basically surrounded by a dairy farm. And so it was the kind of conditions that I could step out my back door and give 2 seconds for my eyes to adjust and see the Milky Way.
Oh my goodness!
And so the sky was always there. So that's where it got started, and I went pretty much all through my childhood, up past high school, up into my adulthood, with just your basic 60 millimeter refractor. Mm-hmm. And that's actually where I got the most interested in Jupiter. Was even with a basic telescope like that, I could see the dance of the moons. I could see the main equatorial belts. And, and so that just hooked me right there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's the same size scope I started with as well. And it's, a 60 millimeter. No one should discount a small refractor like that. I mean, you can do some valuable work. I did 200 observations of a crater when I was in the ALPO training program in the 70s. So it's got me through that thing. So, yeah.
And, and from a really dark sky.
Right.
The things, star clusters, open clusters, what looked best in that little scope. But from a dark sky, I could see the star clusters pretty nicely. It was the kind of conditions that I would use my 7x35 binoculars to just scan around until I saw something fuzzy and then aim the telescope at it.
Oh, wow.
So it's now I've gone back to that project. It's not like that anymore. It's all like that.
No, there aren't many sites like that anymore.
Yes.
Now, what's your current observing equipment?
My current is in just, let's see, it was, I guess, officially just after I joined ALPO. I knew that I wanted to do high power views of Jupiter and Mars and planets, things like that. And so combination of commercial parts and scavenging parts put together a 6-inch F10 Newtonian.
Wow.
And that gives refractor-like images back before that size refractors were even close to being affordable.
So you built that yourself?
And so that's my main instrument, is my 6-inch F10. I also have a little yard sale rescue Tasco 4.5-inch that I mainly use for outreach events and things like that.
But you built the reflector yourself?
Yeah, I bought the optics from Jaegers, if anybody remembers them anymore. Okay. Bought the optics from them and then kind of put things together, mix and match. The primary mirror mount is plywood and hardware, using the plans from, I think, the Edmund Scientific Little Blue How to Make a Telescope book. And, and things like that. So I did a lot of my finder scope is was originally a terrestrial 60 millimeter refractor, one of those kind of odd zoom kind of telescopes that a friend gave me. And I took the zoom part out of it and put an eyepiece in it and mounted it on the side of the tube. And that's my finder, things like that. So just being the poor young married guy, just save money where I could. So,
right.
The other thing that's fun about my telescope, and anybody that's listening that's anywhere around me already knows me, is this: the tube is a 8-inch used sewer pipe.
Used.
I found it at some. I got it for $5. Oh yeah, okay. But I found it at used plumbing kind of place.
Wow.
So I look around. Oh, used plumbing. I go to this yard that back behind the place was like probably a couple of dozen toilets sitting in the grass and stuff like that, and a bunch of PVC pipe that was obviously been dug up by a backhoe, so it was all in pieces and cracked and stuff like that. And I found a section that looked like it had enough undamaged part, and looked at the guy. What do you want for that? And he kind of looked at me funny. He said, "Give me $5." But and I was going to paint it, but it quickly became like kind of that's my gimmick, because it still says in green letters along the side there, sewer. And so I'm the guy with the sewer scope.
That's great. Stands out at a star party, I'm sure.
Yes, and so I wasn't the first one to do that. My high school buddy back in Jacksonville was the first one to see a sewer pipe at a construction site or something like that, and he was grinding his own 8-inch telescope. Wow! And he still has that, by the way. So.
Another sewer pipe. You just started a club.
Yeah, the sewer scope and the mount is on a German equatorial mount, also from Jaegers. Okay. But the other stuff like that was what I could build for myself. And in 1986, it probably cost me altogether, well, not counting the mount because my high school buddy gave me his old mount, but not counting the mount cost me like $225.
Wow.
Well,
sounds like a deal, and optically really nice too, huh?
Yeah, and it's just with the 6-inch, 1-inch diagonal, and so the diffraction from the central obstruction is almost non-existent, and so I can crank it up. I normally look at Jupiter at 215 power, 7mm orthoscopic. Okay, and on a good night, I could probably crank it up to 300, but I just never got around to getting that eyepiece.
Wow. Wonderful. So what got you involved with the Association of Lunar Planetary Observers?
Well, I was aware of it, already. I've had a continuous subscription to Sky and Telescope magazine since 1970. And, so it was mentioned in the magazine. And about then, in the 80s, after getting married and buying the first house and kind of getting settled down, I wanted to do more than just look. I wanted to be able to contribute to research where I could. And so that's where I started scheming to come up with, okay, what kind of telescope can I make that I can afford? And and that's why I wanted to join the ALPO, so I could submit observations that would have scientific usefulness. And so that was all. I guess I joined in 1985. Okay. I went and looked at. I still have my paper issues of the Strolling Astronomer, and my first one was published in October of '85. So
okay, all right. So what got you involved with the Jupiter section?
Jupiter's just always been my favorite planet. As I mentioned before, just the dance of the moons and watching the eclipses was exciting. And then especially after getting my 6-inch telescope and being able to see the belts and zones and the red spot in pretty good amount of detail, then I thought it's just my favorite thing to look at. And so let's go ahead and contact the Jupiter section and get started.
Okay. Yeah, so, we're recording this in August of 2019, and Jupiter right now is very prominent in the evening sky, and it looks incredible.
Oh, I guess it does. This part of Florida in August is thunderstorm season.
This is true.
And so
I'm sorry. I'll delete that part.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's just, it is kind of, have you lived in this part of Florida?
I've never lived in Florida. I'm Southern California.
Okay, because it is just, people talk about lightning, and it really is some summers, it's not always, but some summers, it's just every afternoon, the big honking thunderstorm. And then it usually takes until somewhat after midnight for all the debris of that to clear out. And so, we just really haven't had much of a chance. Actually, right now in late August, we have what's probably going to turn into a tropical depression, and it'll run up the east coast of Florida, but it will spread a lot more clouds and things like that.
Yeah, we're coming into hurricane season right now.
Yeah, so it's one of those kind of things of I've gotten about 3 decent looks of Jupiter this apparition, but just you have good days, you have bad days, right. Or good years and bad years, and so.
Okay. Well, why don't you give us an overview of the Jupiter section?
Well, Jupiter section, we mostly collect nowadays images, and that's part of what I do. My job is just running the ALPO Jupiter Yahoo group, and that's where ALPO members are discussing what they're seeing on Jupiter and not directly submitting the images, but submitting links to where we can see the images. And so even though I'm not seeing it with my telescope, I'm seeing these wonderful images from the likes of Anthony Wesley and Christopher Goh and Mark Delcroix and all those kind of things. So I'm getting a lot of vicarious observing of Jupiter. And that's pretty much the biggest focus, is just collecting these images and making them available for the professionals. There's also the old school technique of what's called transit timing, where you time when a feature on Jupiter is right halfway between east and west, and then from that you can derive the longitude of it, and we can track the features where they're drifting in terms of that, and so that's another part of it. And then up in it's kind of winding down now, but we also have a Galilean eclipse program where you time, and this is something that can be done with a 60 millimeter refractor.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of that with John Westfall.
Yeah, with John Westfall. And so, it's kind of wound down now since his passing. And also, the point of the eclipse timing program before was to help refine the JPL ephemerides, and to see if they were accurately predicting. And if you participated in it, you saw that in the reports that John put out, there were times when, especially Europa, was not quite following what the ephemeris said it should. And, and so that was a help for the dynamics guys in JPL to refine their math for what these moons are doing, and also to maybe get a little hint of what's going on at Jupiter itself. And so that's pretty much so imaging, and of course the descriptive reports, and then the Galilean timings and the transit timings for the people that are still old school. And that's for if you don't have for people that don't have a lot of imaging equipment, stuff like that, then they can still do the transit timings, which is still very important in tracking the various weather features on Jupiter.
Okay, let's back up a minute. You talked about the Yahoo section. What is that?
Okay, so Yahoo, as in the online section. This was when I became an assistant recorder. Was just a way for all of the members to communicate easily and quickly. And so it's Yahoo groups. And so I started that in 2001, and I'm the moderator of that. And it's an old school email list. So you post something on that, and then it's mass emailed to everybody. Or it doesn't have to be emailed. You can, as a user, you can choose to get it through a digest, which is actually the way I do it. So each day it takes whatever new messages have come in and then sends you one email with those. And then you also have the choice of just going on your own time to the website and looking at the messages there. But it's relatively instant communication. Do you remember when Anthony Wesley saw the non-Shoemaker Levy 9 impact of Jupiter?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the word got out most quickly by his post to the Yahoo group.
Huh. Okay.
In fact, I was sitting on my back porch on a Sunday, and looking through the messages, and that's when he said, "I haven't seen anything like this since Shoemaker Levy 9. Could have been hit again." And so that was all just very exciting. But that was probably the quickest way that word got out was through the Yahoo group.
Okay, and there's a link for that on the ALPO webpage?
Yes.
Okay, I will find that, and I'll add that to the show notes so people, if they want to, they can go there for information on the Jupiter section. And they also upload images there as well?
Yes, and we've started, not me, but the section has started an archive of, just a place for you to upload your images. And that's actually, when you take images, that's the best thing, is to upload it to the through the website to the Jupiter archive, where it's not only just in an archive, but it's indexed and things like that. It's best if the user, there's a kind of a format for what the file name should be, just because that makes it easier for indexing, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the best way to get your images to the Jupiter section for the analysis, and to make it available to any professionals that want to study them.
Okay, I've also seen that there's a ALPO Japan. Now, that's not related to us in any way, is it?
Correct. It just the names just kind of lined up, and so they weren't trying to be connected to us. And ALPO in the United States came first,
right? And
I'm not even sure if they anybody even knew about that until somebody pointed out to them later. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But it's as in the astronomy world, people don't fret a whole lot about those kind of identities. No. And so the ALPO Japan is a great resource in connections, similar to the Jupiter section of the British Astronomical Association.
Okay. Yeah, I believe Walter Haas would have sued a dog food company a long time ago if he felt there was a problem.
Yeah. But Walter was never that kind of a guy.
No, I know.
Yeah, I've had a chance to meet him a couple of. Actually, his sister used to live just across the bay from me in Clearwater.
Oh.
And so one time, and I'm trying to remember, I think this was back still in the days when we were communicating by snail mail. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned that he was going to be visiting his sister, and did I want to come over and chat?
Oh, my goodness.
So I got to see him there.
Oh, good.
Besides at the couple of conventions I've been able to attend.
Yeah, that's where I've mostly met him, was at conventions early on. Now, is there suggested observing equipment for the Jupiter section?
For the Jupiter section, other than the Galilean satellites, if you're going to want to do imaging or sketching, that's where I did most of my contributions, was sketching Jupiter, and that's still.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and it's still accepted. It's still important, especially now if skilled people sketching are submitting these observations. That allows us and the researchers to compare what the sketch showed as to what the digital images show, and that gives a better idea of historical sketches, comparing, what features, what they look like, now that we can do all sorts of multispectral imaging. But probably for imaging, actually, Brian Combs, I believe, uses a 4-inch apochromatic refractor. So I would say, a 4-inch refractor, 6-inch reflector, and then up from there. And, and especially with the imaging and the ability of doing the processing, you might not really need much more than that. Part of the reason is that our atmosphere kind of limits how much you can get out of it anyway, just in terms of seeing. So,
okay. Now, you mentioned transit timings as one of the programs. Can you give us an explanation of, you talked about it a little bit, but if someone were interested in doing that, what equipment, how do they, and what are they timing?
Okay, so equipment, 4-inch refractor, 6-inch reflector, something like that. For the red spot, you can even do it with a smaller instrument. But Jupiter takes a little under 10 hours to rotate, which means that you can not quite in real time watch it rotate, but you can certainly look at something and go off and do something for 5 minutes and come back and see that it's turned. And so what for transit timing, what you're doing is just mentally drawing a line down the middle of the disc from east to west, or west to east, however you want to do it, and watching a feature and timing when it's right there in the middle of the disc, halfway between rising and setting, and get that time to the closest minute. And then there's there used to be some math to do, but now there's a couple of places on the internet where you can then turn that into a longitude. And I'll talk about longitude in just a minute. But that's pretty much what it is just what you can see. And mostly what you're going to be timing are the various kind of spots, the great red spot, the smaller oval that we call BA, some of the other features. They have all sorts of interesting names like barges and festoons and things like that. But pretty much if you can see it in your telescope, then you can watch it as it marches across the disc, just watching every minute or two until you decide that it's right there halfway across, and record that time. And that gives us longitude. Now let me talk about longitude. Back when the telescopes got good enough for something like the red spot to be seen, then everybody got excited. Oh, we can find out how fast Jupiter spins. And so the easiest thing to do was to do pretty much the same technique with the great red spot. And so that came up to a time of, with a few seconds around there, about 9 hours and 55 minutes for Jupiter to go around once, well, at least for the red spot to go around once. A little bit more careful observation found that the equatorial regions of Jupiter spin faster because it's not a solid surface, it's a gas giant. And so things at the equator would take 9 hours and 50 minutes to go around. So the original idea was that to come up with an arbitrary 0 point for longitude, it was going to be the red spot. But then more careful observation showed that the red spot drifts. And so gets a little bit ahead, a little bit behind, mostly going one way. And so getting ahead of itself. So somewhere, I don't remember when, they just kind of said, all right, let's come up with an average number. And this is the rotation rate of the latitude of the red spot, which is most of the planet. And then the other, an average for the latitudes near the equator. And those are just arbitrarily decided periods. And it's down to the second. Now I don't have that memorized. And so that's the red spot is system 2 and the equatorial region is system 1. And so then using that reference, which is completely arbitrary, but at least it's consistent, then you compute longitudes and you can see how things drift within those longitudes. Now there's also a system 3 which tracks the rotation rate of Jupiter's magnetic field, which is yet a different number, which I forget what that number is. And so supposedly that's the actual rotation rate of the core, but that's just kind of surmised. So consequently the red spot, that's right, goes the other way. The red spot gains longitude at a relatively constant rate, but not always. I myself watched over, I think it was only a course of like 4 days. between timing, doing a transit timing of the red spot back when I had to do the calculations manually. And then 4 days later, I got another timing of the red spot, and it was coming out all wrong. And it was like, wait, and no, I didn't make a mistake. The red spot had drifted about its own length in 4 days.
Really?
Yeah. And it was like really, for the people that look at Jupiter, there's kind of like that turbulence on the one side, on the following side. And basically, when I looked at it the second time, the turbulence was gone. And it was almost like the red spot just kind of drifted over there and sat on top of it. It was really strange.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, so that was just really, really, really weird. That was the only time I've seen it drift that much that quickly, but it did. It just a little zip over there, and in less than a week. I don't remember. This is back in.
That's great.
Probably before 1990.
I like that we can actually do. Amateur astronomers could do science.
And that was
like I said, with relatively small telescopes, 4 and 6 inch.
Yeah, that was my draw. I mean, it's like, okay, I've looked at pretty stuff long enough, but let me see. I've always been interested in science, and I've always wanted to be able to contribute to it. And so the ALPO showed me a way that I could do that with my modest equipment. I also did a pretty good amount of observing of Mars for the apparitions, and so and that's been pretty much my focus. I did a little bit of Venus observing too.
Okay.
Oh, and I did in the early days John Westfall's Lunar Dome survey.
Oh yeah. Now we've just kicked that off again as well.
Yeah, I mean, but now it's like on the next level.
Yeah.
Because John was still trying to just kind of get this catalog in a standardized way of categorizing these domes, and so now we're kind of like to the next level. We've got this basic information. Let's kick it up a notch.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good program too. They've been on the podcast to talk about that. Now, how many current contributors does the Jupiter section have?
Contributors. Yeah. Ooh. Now I don't know a way of getting a hard number on that. I know on the ALPO Jupiter Yahoo group there's over 500.
Oh wow!
But most of them are just listening in,
okay,
kind of a thing. But in terms of contributors, I would say if you count everybody up, that people like like me this year that would only be able to get maybe 1 or 2 observations in, still 15 or so.
Okay,
easily.
All right.
15 or 20.
All right. So, in the observations that have come in, what are some of the interesting things that we've seen during the current apparition?
Oh, this apparition has been just it's been all about the red spot, because interesting things are going on with the red spot. For one thing, this is one thing that is kind of well established. The red spot is slowly shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
And you can compare images taken from 20 years ago with images taken now, and it's pretty. In fact, for me, having observed Jupiter personally, every time I do get a look at the red spot, I go, "Dang, it looks small," because I remember when it was bigger. But this year,
redder,
and well, that's come and gone.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. I have seen. There's times when the red spot has just kind of faded completely, and all you see is the hollow, basically where the circulation is, but no red at all. And I've seen a lovely salmon pink.
Yep.
And then, red and really red, and then starting to get almost reddish brown brick kind of color. So, but yeah, this year it's doing the red part of the red spot really well.
Okay.
But it's, we've gotten, especially with the current observers, gotten images where you can see details within the red spot and track how fast it spins within itself. But this year it's been like shedding pieces of itself. And they're calling them flakes. The thing about terminology, you just kind of say what kind of comes to mind at the time, and everybody runs with it, because we're not quite sure physically what's going on. But you can see where some of the red along the edge almost looks like it gets thrown off by a centrifugal force into the jet stream that's running along the border of the red spot. And it goes and goes along there and kind of fades a little bit. And that's been going on all apparition. Everybody's just like everybody's kind of going, have you ever seen this before? And I don't think anybody has seen it before, especially since it was ongoing. I think it's finally settled down, but for 3 months or so, it's been just kind of like flaking off here and another little piece goes off that direction, then another kind of hangs out there and goes off, and and so we're the thing of it is we're just observing from here, and we're not quite sure what is physically going on at Jupiter. It's possibility that this is going on all the time, but the higher level ice clouds keep us from seeing that. But this year we're able to see that. I don't know.
Interesting. But, and there's also recently a observation, or I guess someone was videotaping the moon or making some images, and they recorded an impact, probably a comet or something like that, into Jupiter.
Yes. Yeah, they've seen several of those over the years. It's just a momentary flash, and apparently not a big enough object to burn up and leave create chemical reactions to leave a dark spot, like with Shoemaker-Levy, the other one that I talked about that Anthony Wesley saw. But part of one of the things that, let me kind of give you a little background, is there's software out there, WinJupos, WinJupos, that's free, and it helps with the image processing. It does one thing is, since Jupiter rotates so fast, if you take 10 minutes to get all of your images in red channel and green channel and blue channel, well, Jupiter is rotating that amount of time, and this software is able to realign it, kind of undo the rotation so that all your three colors line up. And so that's helped a lot with the kind of detail that can be eked out of images of Jupiter. But as soon as somebody saw this flash, somebody wrote an add-on to that then analyzes your images. Because the way planetary observers image something like Jupiter is they take video. And then with WinJupos and other processing software, it looks at the individual frames,
right, and
lines them up and throws out the ones that the scene just for that second was so bad, and that is just, you can't see anything like that. And it's kind of adaptive optics on the back end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, somebody wrote this add-on to WinJupos that you can upload, you can run, it runs your video that you took looking for flashes like that.
Oh.
You don't have to go through frame by frame. It does it for you. Wow. And then it says, hey, this frame here looks like there's something. And then, you can go back and look at it for yourself.
I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember who did that add-on. Again, since I'm not playing with it myself, I just get all this vicariously by what people are talking about on the Yahoo group. And so, but yeah, so that's a really cool thing, is just that you take your video, you do your processing. Meanwhile, you set your computer looking to see if there are any flashes. And if you do, then there's a timestamp with that. And then you can see if anybody else got a flash for confirmation. Now, that's the first one of those flashes. That's a fun story. Just because Anthony Wesley in Australia was imaging Jupiter, and he just happened to look at his computer monitor when he saw this flash. And, in his time zone, it was like, 3 a.m, something like that. And so he did what every astronomer does. He picked up his cell phone and called Christopher Go in the Philippines, knowing that he'd be up. And said, Chris, are you imaging right now? Yeah. Look at this timestamp. Do you see a flash there? And he did too. when he went back to that part. And so that was like instant confirmation that it wasn't just some artifact of somebody's
flash
computer.
in the CCD or something.
Yeah, and so like that. And so shortly after that is when man, I wish I remember the name. I'm pretty sure it's on if you go to the WinJupo site.
Okay.
Which is also listed on the ALPO Jupiter section. But yeah, somebody wrote up this little routine to look for that, and so now if it sees something, then you can go to the Yahoo group or whatever and say, I saw a flash at this timestamp on this day. The rest of you guys, did you see it yourself? And with that, we've gotten 6 or so confirmed meteor impacts like that.
Interesting. That's wild.
Yeah, and that is big time science because they're kind of trying to guess, try to determine how much material is still floating around out there in the solar system. And so there are estimates of how often Jupiter gets hit, but they're just estimates, kind of just kind of based on a little bit what we know. Well, now this is hard data that can constrain some of those estimates, So that's again, it's just really cool science without having to have like a big old observatory with it.
That's a good point. I like that. Now, the observations that are submitted to the Jupiter section, a lot of them go to the Yahoo site, but you also publish results in the journal, right?
Yes, in the journal. And so Richard Schmoody, our coordinator, puts together an apparition report and chooses images to illustrate that. And back before Richard did it, when I was doing sketches, I've had a number of my sketches published in the journal. That's always just kind of cool. I'm a published guy.
Yep.
And if you go to the Yahoo group, the picture for the Yahoo group is by shamelessly scanned in one of my sketches.
Of course, there's nothing wrong with that.
But yeah, so they're put together, and besides making them available with the professionals, Richard puts together apparition reports that are published in the journal. Detail, I'm sure, when he puts together a report for this apparition, it'll have a lot of this talking about the interesting things that the red spot's doing. So
okay.
Yes.
Now you mentioned professionals, so I take it there's a lot of pro-am collaboration in the Jupiter section. Yes,
yeah. There's a lot. I can't name any of the professionals right now, but I know I know that they are more than just aware of us.
Oh yeah.
That they like the fact, especially now that we have a nice indexed image archive, and so that they can. When they're observing Jupiter with the Hubble Space Telescope, then they can compare it with the amateur images. And then similarly, the amateurs are still on the forefront of saying, hey, something interesting is going on. And then the organization gets the word out to the professionals that something interesting is going on. And then they can schedule time on ground-based or the Hubble Space Telescope, things like that.
Right.
So it's an important part of it.
Yeah, Craig, this is great. I really appreciate you coming on. Is there any additional information you'd like to share about the Jupiter section?
No, I think I managed to cover all of that. I start thinking about, because I'm kind of one of those guys, especially after doing the planetarium and I'm a teacher. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like you wind me up and you just watch me go.
I can see that, and that you're a perfect guest for a podcast, I tell you.
That's pretty much everybody's welcome, and there's certainly level for, especially going through the training program, so that you learn some of the basic ways of doing a systematic recording of data, and then after that, all observations are welcome. And if you just have time to do just submitting transit timings, which especially even like just the red spot, as I mentioned, it drifts kind of erratically sometimes. So if you just have the time to look in the sky and telescope or one of the other places where you can see when the red spot's going to be on your side of the planet, and go out and time its transit to get a longitude for it and submit that, that's all still good. And for me, I'm thinking, well, it doesn't sound like much, but hey, it's an excuse to look at Jupiter.
There you go. That's very good. So how can everybody get a hold of you?
Let's see. Email address is MacDouc, as in the first 6 letters of MacDougal, and then C for Craig.
Okay.
At Verizon.net.
All right. I'll add that onto the show notes.
Yeah, I was going to say that's listed on the Jupiter section page.
Okay.
So, and yeah, I was on the internet back in the early days, when it was DOS based, and you could only have 8 characters on the left side of the @ sign.
Oh yeah.
And so so for one thing that I need to log on, that was what was assigned me. First 6 letters of MacDougal, and then the C with a space left over in case, or for example, my wife is Candace with a C. So if she was going to be logged on there, I would be CR, MacDoucr, and she would be MacDouca. That kind of thing.
Right.
And so later on, when I'm trying to come up with something for my Verizon account, and I tried some of the kind of normal variations of MacDougal, and they were all already taken. I said, let me try this stupid way. and nobody else had used it, so that's my deal.
Great. I got a favor to ask.
Sure.
Is your saxophone handy?
Well, it takes a couple of minutes to put it together.
Would you mind playing us out a little tune?
Okay. Ooh, I have to remember. I mean, it is right here beside me.
Okay.
So,
I've never had a guest play a musical instrument on the podcast. You're first.
Oh, okay. All right. I have no idea what my computer microphone will do with the sound of this, but it'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
Now, for people who have played instruments like saxophone, clarinets, you have a reed that needs to be wet.
Right.
Okay. So that means if I do any more talking in the next about 30 seconds, I'm going to be talking with a reed stuck in my mouth.
Okay. Well, I can cut the next 30 seconds out.
Oh, it is kind of fun because if you're playing a saxophone, if you're doing it professionally, you learn how to speak intelligently. But I probably won't say much of anything.
All right.
All right, reed. Now, the other thing about playing something like the saxophone is you put the reed on, and the first thing you do is complain about the reed. So I have to find out because it is, it's organic. It's
right.
And you're never quite sure what it's going to do when you first try to start playing on it. Okay. All right. So this is the saxophone solo in Ravel's orchestration of Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, the movement, The Old Castle.
All right.
There you go.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Craig.
All right. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the podcast again.
All righty.
All right. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun. I really want to thank Craig MacDougal for coming on the Observer's Notebook podcast today. He really did a great job, and I love the playing sax, too. Pretty fun. We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook on the 1st and 15th of every month. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, please rate and review us. It brings more listeners to the podcast. It helps publicize it. Please, please, please take 2 minutes out of your time. Go to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating and help us out. You can also listen to us on iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, and Amazon Echo. And if you really enjoy the podcast, please consider donating to it. We need every single dime. This is a self-sufficient podcast. No money's come from the ALPO to support it. It takes a great deal of time and energy, and we got bandwidth and all sorts of things we got to pay for on a monthly basis. So please, 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 if you can help us out, I appreciate it. You can by going to Patreon. You can give up to $35 a month, where you will receive 1 year's membership to the podcast, 1 year's membership to the ALPO, and producer credits on the podcast. And with that, I want to thank the producer of this podcast, Steve Siedentop, for his continued generous support of the podcast. Thank you very much, Steve. The link for Patreon, as well as the link for the ALPO, is in the show notes. If you have a program suggestion or you want to chat with me, drop me an email at commentman@commentman.net or on Twitter at observersnbpod. Until next time, my hope is you always have clear and steady skies. Thank you very much for listening.